Welcome, and thanks for joining us today for the 35th episode of the Restaurant Dealmaker Show. I'm delighted to have Scott Rodrick as my co-host today. I've had the opportunity of knowing Scott for over 15 years, as I had the opportunity of selling him a restaurant, bar, banquet facility at a Peninsula Golf Country Club many years ago, and had the opportunity of working with Scott as a member of the Golden Gate Restaurant Association, where Scott was a board member and president. Scott has quite an impressive background as a business owner, a leader in franchise management, business development, and community leadership. Starting from a single franchise McDonald's location in 1993, he has successfully expanded to 18 McDonald's restaurants, most of which are in San Francisco, with 800 employees over the past 32 years. Scott serves as the National Brand Trust spokesperson for McDonald's USA on a variety of contemporary issues, including McJobs, corporate responsibility, and QSR nutrition. Scott has been a board member of the California Restaurant Association, the Golden Gate Restaurant Association, and Ronald McDonald House at Stanford. He has taken leadership positions within the McDonald's system, and over the last 20 years, serving on the GAF board of directors for several terms, chairman of the PR committee for the co-op, and president of Ronald McDonald House Charities of the Bay Area. Scott exemplifies being a mensch, which means a good person, as he is strongly committed to making this a better world by helping people and giving back to the community. He often shares his people-first philosophy with others. Scott does much more than talk about doing the right thing for his employees and members of the community. He practices it every day. Scott is an innovator and is always looking for new ways to raise the bar, which he calls a be nice culture. Not only does he set the example for elevating the level of happiness in his restaurants, he absolutely empowers his employees to do the same. He has employed, mentored, and collaborated with thousands of hardworking individuals. Through Scott's experience as a successful restaurateur, he's been able to share his experience and perspectives with others. One of the most satisfying aspects of his chosen entrepreneurial career has been the ability to mentor up-and-coming business owners and various food and beverage brands, and he has co-founded several awesome restaurant startups. So welcome, Scott, and it's a real honor to have you here today. And the first question is particularly near and dear to my heart because I started similarly to you. My father started me in the restaurant when I was 8 years old. He would go visit a manager on a weekend, bring me in to make milkshakes and root beer floats, and then go into the kitchen and double grind patties, meat, ground beef, and then hand stamp patty. So he indoctrinated me at a very early age, and I'm sure that there must be some correlation there, perhaps, as how your father influenced you as well. So my first question to you is, how did you get started in the food and beverage business, and what was your first job in the industry? As I believe you got started in the business similarly to how I got started in the business with each of us through our respective fathers.
Well, Steve, first of all, it's great to see you again, as always. I did not have the word mensch on my bingo card this morning, but you've literally covered it in the first 5 minutes. So that's a good thing. Yes, that's Steve. You and I literally grew up in the amazing world of family-owned businesses, and I had the great fortune to have been raised by a father who was one of Ray Kroc's first franchisees in South Florida back in the early 60s. So growing up, as far back as I could remember, my dad, like your father, was always going into work 7 days a week and storing operating supplies in the garage, and was always on the phone or writing letters to customers and employees. And, his life 24/7, like your dad's life in the Zim's brand, was all about the family business. And so I had the great fortune in high school of working at my father's McDonald's restaurants on the weekends. And then, of course, over the summers, and I started working as a crew person and in the drive-through and in the grill. And then over time, as I went through my college years, I had a chance to go through the floor manager training program, and I got several years of what it was like to work under the arches before I went off to college. Speaking candidly, I didn't really think about being a McDonald's franchisee while I was in high school working for my family. I had these grandiose visions of being an attorney or being an investment banker. I went off to college and thought I was going to do, some extraordinary things for the world. And I, turned my apron and my spatula back to my father, I think at high school graduation, and said, "Dad, this is it. I'm retiring my spatula. I will never work in a McDonald's, but thank you for the opportunity." And I went off. Now, of course, I didn't realize that at the time I had ketchup in my veins and that I had the entrepreneurial spirit imbibed in my genetic stream. And so, after a short career working in banking on Wall Street, I called my father and sheepishly said, "Hey, Dad, you know that McDonald's thing that I thought I didn't have an interest in? I'd love to learn how to be a franchisee." And so in 1989, I moved from New York with my father's help to California, and we identified a McDonald's for sale in the city of San Francisco. And
Which one was that? Which
it, it
location?
it was and still is the McDonald's on Bayshore Boulevard. So if you were
Yeah,
right next to the old Goodman Lumber, it's now a
of
home.
course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So great part of the community. It's right off Highway 101, so tremendous visibility. There's a
Yes.
huge industrial area behind it. A lot of people, when you look, it's one of the highest volume McDonald's in all of the state of California. And if you
Is it
look at
really?
it, it doesn't, in terms of location, one might say, oh, it's a B location because it's not an easy off ramp from the highway and there's not a lot of residential directly around the restaurant.
Right.
But frankly, it's with all of the industrial behind it and all of the traffic flow up and down Bayshore to the various communities on that part of town, it is an extraordinary piece of real estate. So we were
Huh.
lucky to have that as our first restaurant. And then, of course, over the years, I had the opportunity to acquire operators who were retiring. And I had the opportunity to help McDonald's identify and build new restaurants in the city. And that is essentially how I ended up in California, having grown up under the arches in Miami.
Wow. It's quite the story. So, what is your favorite part of the hospitality business?
Well, for me, in terms of the favorite part of the hospitality business, I would say it's twofold. First, in general, I love the theatrics of being in the restaurant space. Every day the curtain goes up, you have a bunch of new audience members that come into the theater to see how you're going to perform. Now, in our case, in the restaurants, it's in the drive-through, it's at the front counter, it's coming out of the kitchen. And so I just love, whether it be in the McDonald's context or in the fine dining context, or whenever you walk into a restaurant, you see all of these tremendous performers, from management to the crew level to the kitchen teams, all reading off the script, practiced
Feedback.
accomplished, and delivering over two expectations. And so, and of course, if you don't get it right, you have the next day to try to improve and get it right. And so I've always thought about the hospitality business in some way being like the theater business, where we're literally practicing and performing, and the curtain goes down and you recollect on what happened that day during the show. And then the next show, you'll have an opportunity to make it better. So that to me is the first thing. The second is, I just love watching the folks that I've hired uh, collaborate with each other and get trained together, and then together deliver an experience to the guests. To me, that is the most fun, interesting part of being in the hospitality business. Now, as an entrepreneur, of course, I love the financial aspects of it. It's provided me a great living and has provided my family and the employees that have worked with me all these decades um, a good living and an opportunity for their own personal growth. But truly, it is really, the fun of the being in the restaurant business, the hospitality business, is the theater of it. And also being the executive producer, essentially being the director, seeing all of these folks come together, training so hard to deliver on show day what our guests hope and expect to get in the dining rooms and in the drive-throughs.
Oh, very well said. That's an interesting way of looking at it. I haven't quite heard a entrepreneur restaurateur's expression of their experience in the restaurant quite as you have stated it. But you have a very unique approach to doing it, and that's wonderful. And it's obviously served you well in terms of motivating you to be very successful and continue your growth pattern. So,
Steve, that point of view comes after 30 years. I'm sure I didn't have such a Dalai Lama vision of what it was like to be working in a restaurant operating like a theater. It was literally like day one survival. I was the opening manager, I was the closing manager, I was the
right,
payroll guy, I was probably the drive-through person during peak periods. And so at that point, early in my career as a franchisee, uh,
yes,
it was really about survival and learning
sure,
the McDonald's platform. And over the years, I learned that I was not going to be successful without a tremendous cast of people around me, both
so
managers and entry-level folks. So I think over time, over the 3 decades that I've been a McDonald's franchisee, I've learned to look at the hospitality space with a much more broad lens in terms of my role in it.
yes. So how many units did it take you before you exited being the hands-on manager doing, filling shifts, doing all the miscellaneous stuff to keep the restaurant alive before you got into more of the true entrepreneurial supervisory type of responsibility?
I think when it was somewhere between the second and third restaurant, I realized that I couldn't do it all on my own. And in fact, I consider my success driven by the success of other people. There was no way, all self-aggrandizement to the side. I realize that these restaurants do not run themselves. You can be the smartest person in the world, but you've got to rely on 30, 40, 50 other human beings to run these restaurants. And if you've got multiple locations, the entrepreneur, the owner, the franchisee, the general manager, the area supervisor, you cannot be in all places at the same time, let alone 2 locations, 3 locations, 5 locations, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, mostly. So I would say between restaurant franchise number 2 and 3, I started to learn how important it was to achieve my personal business goals uh, through through recruiting, training, and motivating other people who saw things the same way I saw them, and were as passionate about the customer experience, about the people culture in the restaurants, about the golden arches as much as I was. It wasn't an easy path. Certainly every single person that I was able to recruit, didn't get it or see it the way I saw it. And as you know, because you've run your own restaurants for many, many, many years, and now in the latter part of your career, you help restaurateurs, big and small, near and far, deal with expansion and in some cases divestiture and different chapters of their life. And so for me, 30 years into this franchise platform, it has been literally the growth has been driven by making good decisions about people and surrounding myself with tremendous group of people that are as passionate about the things that are as important to me as they are to them.
Oh, that's very nice. I know we had an issue in our restaurants where we got really good people. Some of them started as dishwashers, worked their way up to food servers, to back of the house, to managers, to area supervisors, and then they left and went on their own and started their own business. How have you experienced that kind of situation where you've had people you've developed and then they've left or done something different than become a McDonald's general manager or perhaps a franchisee? How's that evolved over the years for you?
So over the years, I have hired and trained and developed countless people. And when I say countless, the number has to be in the thousands.
Sure.
And it is great fun, and it brings me a lot of joy when I bump into people of all walks of life who either worked for my family in San Francisco and now are doing something else, or even better, hearing my fellow McDonald's franchisees, their story on how they became franchisees. There are a lot of franchisees in the McDonald's space, and I'm sure the same is true for parallel franchising platforms that came through the process by way of, my dad was in the business, my mom was in the business, I'm going to learn the business. But there are many, many franchisees who started as corporate employees, who started as managers, that fell in love with the golden arches and decided to raise their hand and raise the capital and try to buy a restaurant. And I think something like 25% of all McDonald's franchisees, so think about 2,000 franchisees around the country, about 500 of them started in the McDonald's world as hourly entry-level folks, went through the training program, became area supervisors, whether they worked for the corporation or they worked for a franchise group. And that brings me a lot of joy when a franchising platform is able to provide opportunity to folks of different races, colors, backgrounds, education level. Some are immigrants to the country, some are third or fourth generation Americans. I mean, it is the franchising platform is an amazing place for people to find opportunity if they so seek it. The other interesting statistic that continues to blow me away is that 1 in 8 Americans have worked at McDonald's at some time in their life. That is
Wow.
really such an extraordinary statistic. And I just came across a statistic uh, over the last year. And if you think about the number of people that whether they worked in high school for a month or two, or they worked in college to pay some bills, or just folks that wanted to work at McDonald's, literally 1 in 8 Americans have worked at a McDonald's restaurant, not just in the restaurant business, but in the McDonald's business. And that to me just talks about how important that brand is in big cities and small cities, on the coasts in mid-America. I mean, it is a brand that has been intricately part of this American fabric since 1955. So back to your question, Steve, it is really a thrill when I'm at a Giants game, or I'm walking around shopping, or I walk into another restaurant, or I see someone who's owning a coffee shop and they say to me, "Hey, you remember me? I used to work for you and your dad 25 years ago. I got my first job working at McDonald's." And I get into these conversations about, well, how on earth did you end up owning this coffee shop? And they say, well, this is my second coffee shop. And, I learned a lot from you, and I went off to college. And you hear all of these great stories. And so that to me is one of the great positive stories in this hospitality business that you and I have been in, where we have the opportunity to not only create jobs, but to train people to work in this environment where you're working on a team, you're learning about responsibility. In some cases, English is a second language, so you're perfecting your communication skills, you're earning a paycheck. And for some, the light bulb goes off and they say, I want to own one of these, or I want to own something like this. And to me, as a franchise owner, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, I love that idea that I'm helping to create a next generation of restaurateurs, whether it's under the golden arches or whether it's the coffee shop guy that I bumped into the other day. I love having the chance to contribute to the hospitality space by empowering, training, motivating another generation of people that love hospitality as much as I do.
That's very nice. That passion, obviously, your exuded passion, obviously, has been responsible for motivating a lot of your people to achieve very good results in their career, I'm sure. Very well said. So, what event or events have been most challenging in your career, and how have you dealt with these challenges?
Well, I think, you know, the restaurant business is no easy business, as I'm sure every single client that you've ever helped buy a restaurant or sell a restaurant for has told you. No one has ever said, Steve, this is such an easy business, everyone should be doing it, right? So I would say, in general, the restaurant business is a serious challenge. Whether you own a single franchise, whether you have a fine dining operation, whether you own a food truck, whether you're into catering, it is a challenging business. And for me, the absolute greatest challenge has been the unknown. So 30 years ago, if someone would have said to me in the early years of my McDonald's career in San Francisco that 20 years later, they were going to pass a law. The city of San Francisco would pass a law prohibiting the sale of Happy Meals. I would have told that person, get back on your flying saucer and leave the solar system because you have no idea what you're talking about. And
Well,
so it's an example of, and one of the greatest challenges that I've ever faced as a restaurant owner, especially in a place like San Francisco, is, you can't plan for the unknown. You can't plan for what a board of supervisors or what a mayor or what someone in the state assembly or the California Senate is thinking about next year, 2 years, or 3 years. And so when legislators make decisions that dramatically impact the operating uh, platform, the operating experience of small business entrepreneurs like myself, that to me represents the greatest challenge to small business growth in a place like California. The most obvious contemporary example of that I think most of your viewers and listeners will recall is the mandated $20 wage that was targeted to only franchises in the state of California, and franchises being defined by any brand that had 60 or more locations around the country was required to increase their starting wage by 25% versus the state minimum wage on April 1st.
yeah, just a point of clarification. Is that fast food franchises with 60 units or more nationally,
All,
or
yeah,
all
all fast food QSRs, quick service restaurants.
fast food QSR?
And so here again, talking about business planning. So if 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I was thinking about, how do I project for labor? How do I project for food costs and utilities and insurance costs, and just trying to figure out average checks and guest count or baseline growth, and just trying to create a projection for my business so I could make the appropriate growth decisions, hiring decisions, CapEx decisions. This complete curveball changes the dynamics of everything. So when you ask, what is my biggest challenge is as a franchisee, broadly speaking, I would say, the restaurant business is a super, super tough, unforgiving business with tremendous upside and can be a lot of fun a lot of the times, but it is tough. And then when you layer on the extraordinary legislative pressure, the regulatory environment in a place like California, and I'm talking about regulations that impact small business owners up and down the state of California. Forget about just the wage. Think about the regulations that occur in almost every aspect, from permitting to mandated healthcare in a place like San Francisco, to just go down the list of regulations that don't exist in places like Texas, Nevada, Florida,
Right.
Mid-America. We are confronted with some pretty extraordinary challenges when operating a business, whether it's a franchise or an independent business in a place like California.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really remarkable how different it is. I attended the conference in Las Vegas. I don't know if you've ever been there. The restaurant development conference in Las
Oh, the
Vegas. Yeah,
restaurant finance conference.
yeah.
Yeah,
Have you been there? Yeah,
I have.
I was fortunate to be on a panel with different brokers from different parts of the country, and the general consensus I got from that conference was that that California is like a third world country when it comes to development. Very few of the big, the big franchises were all represented by their CEOs, COOs, CFOs, and they just talked like, we don't want to go do business in California. It's too tough, too much regulation.
And Steve, think about the repercussions of what the California Assembly has done over the last decade, and the results that we in California are seeing. I mean, it's just not, I'm not in the opinion business. I really like to, and I don't like to opine on, when it comes to my business, on emotion, but
Mhm.
these are the facts. I mean, the fact of the matter is the unemployment rate is the worst in the state of California than any state in the union. We are ranked number one in terms of worst unemployment percentage of population in the entire in the entire United States. And you think about job growth, we're ranked second to last or dead last over the last year or two in job growth. I was reading an article just the other day produced by the Hoover Institute, which is a think tank at Stanford University. And I was shocked to see that 96% of the job growth over the last year and a half through June 2024, 96% of California job growth were government jobs. So when you
Wow.
think about overregulation and how important small businesses to, well, every state, but of course, California, where 2/3 of all new jobs are created by small businesses, 2/3 of all new jobs. Everything that should be coming out of Sacramento and the governor's office and the state assembly and the state senate should be about trying to uplift and strengthen the environment, the operating environment for small businesses, including restaurants, and not putting roadblock after roadblock, trying to harm, whether directly or and intentionally or indirectly, something as important as a vibrant restaurant industry in a place as important as the state of California.
So what is the state legislators' motivation to being so harsh on the restaurant industry and just being so, oppressive in terms of, any kind of realistic guidelines for, a successful operator's, history? I mean, how, what's the California Restaurant Association involvement in that? I know they do a certain amount of lobbying. Have they been very effective to overcome a lot of this just negative, legislation that is, brewing and has come about?
Well, let's talk specifically to the April AB 1228, AB 257 laws that drove the 25% increase overnight on franchises in the state of California.
Right.
Most of the legislators in Sacramento had this belief that it was the little guy versus multinational global corporations, McDonald's and Starbucks. And very few legislators at the time really understood that almost every franchise in the state of California was run by families like mine. They're family-owned small businesses. And yes, while the flags that we raise over our restaurants are global in nature, that's the power of franchising. Those restaurants are built and staffed and owned by independent individual small business owners like myself. And so it is quite easy in the absence of them legislators not understanding who really owns the restaurants. It makes for great press release copy during election season to say we're raising wages by 25% because big corporations can afford it. And living in California is expensive. I mean, you've heard the rah-rahs and you've seen the press conferences. And so unfortunately, when you're legislating on things that are trying to grab headlines versus legislating to improve the small business operating environment, just think about this, Steve. I mean, here's one of the conundrums that I have. If we in the state of California should be all about finding the right entry level wage for folks. Whether you work in a McDonald's, whether you work in a bookstore, in a gas station, whether you're babysitting, whether you're picking crops in the field, a fair wage for one person in California should be a fair wage for all. And this April 2024 moment in our governmental history was driven around targeting unfairly a poorly timed piece of legislation that went after about 15,000 restaurants in the state of California that so happened to be on the franchising platform. And I think, you know, we restaurateurs, as you know, we spend our day and nights thinking about what's within our four walls in our restaurants. We don't really get involved in politics. We don't advocate for our brands, our platform, and our industry enough. And it's one of the reasons why a group of us about a year ago came together to form an association. We call it KFOB, the California Alliance of Family-Owned Businesses, because we really felt that there was not a group of people promoting with the legislators that make decisions that could make or break our business model. We felt like there were not enough voices coming to Sacramento representing the interests, the aspirations, and the concerns of small business owners like myself. And so 125 franchisees in the state of California banded together, and we decided, with a hard lesson learned in the state of California, in Sacramento, that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And the restaurant industry on the franchising platform absolutely ended up being on the menu with the outcome of that bad dish on April 1st. So here we are, months later, and economists of all shapes and sizes are trying to unpack the import of what's happened in the state of California. But I can tell you the data that at least that I see, that I get a chance to see in the news, is not very positive about the outcome of that wage increase.
Yeah. And that wage increase has also had a domino effect and has raised the bar for wages throughout the industry, be it franchise or non-franchise, because when back of the house people, making less than $20 realize they go work at a franchise for $20 an hour plus, and they're not non-tip by and large, that puts pressure on the independent non-franchised operators to raise the bar on their wage structure in order to keep, good people from leaving. So it's had a total domino effect to the whole industry in California, restaurant industry.
We do not live in vacuums next to each other. And I think, because your perspective is driven by or born by having run your own businesses, and understanding implications of laws and your next door neighbor, even if that neighbor is a competitor. I mean, think about, as you just said, Steve, I own a McDonald's on this street corner. Next door to me is an independent coffee shop, and there's someone who works at that coffee shop cleaning the tables for that coffee shop, let's say a young man or young woman in high school making $16 an hour, and turns to the owner of the coffee shop and says, "Hey, boss, I can work next door. I can walk literally 30 yards next door and make 25% more cleaning tables at $20 an hour." And so what is the coffee shop owner going to do? Is he going to, or she going to say, I can't afford to pay you $16? Or does that person say, I respect your work. I can't lose you. I need you for the summer. Here's 17, here's 18, here's 19. And
Right.
So the legislators, instead of unfairly targeting a single subsector of the California restaurant economy, they should have really been having meaningful, thoughtful discussions about the cost of living in California, and also balancing that cost of living in California for all employees, not just those that work in fast food. What is it going to take to continue making our small business community healthy, so that healthy small business community, remember, that community that drives 2/3 of job creation in California, to make that community healthy so it's actually creating new jobs for people that want to enter the workforce? That's the attention, that's the energy that I think our legislators, our elected officials in Sacramento, and even in city halls up and down the state of California should be focused on. So when you ask the question about challenges and threats, I suppose those outside of the restaurant business would think about, well, it's the cost or access to insurance and interest rates and labor force, and can you hire people? And this whole government overregulation phase that we're in the state of California, specifically related to impacting running restaurants in California, has added a whole new dimension to the concept of challenges running restaurants in a place, an amazing place with tremendous upside, but tremendous challenges in California.
Yes, very much so. So, and this sort of segues into my next question, which is, what changes do you see in the hospitality industry in California because of the current economic challenges we've just discussed? Shortage of employees, the high operating costs of employees, products, occupancy costs, and other expenses. I know, we've been since COVID, the market for selling and buying restaurants has been largely a buyer's market because, most independent operators' bottom lines have been hammered. They just have no way of raising menu prices dollar for dollar versus the increases because people have only so much disposable income, and they'll price themselves totally out of the market. And we're seeing, obviously, the bottom lines are just getting hammered of these independent operators. And how do you? What's your forecast for the restaurant industry in California in 2025 or in the future, dealing with all these issues and the tremendous fallout that has occurred and has occurred in COVID? Supposedly, the California Restaurant Association stated 6 months, I think, after COVID, that 30% of all food and beverage establishments in California, and they said there were about 80,000, a third of them, 30%, were gone.
Wow.
I don't know if that's a true number or not,
And
but
that seems like such an extraordinary number.
yes,
Even if that number were fractionalized,
yes,
it's still an extraordinary number. The restaurant world in general, as you know, changed because of and right after COVID. And it's not just a California thing, it's across America thing. I just see it in my own restaurants. We are, if you think about the percentage of our business that's now on people's telephones and being delivered to their homes instead of coming to the McDonald's, and the fact that you now go into a McDonald's and you can order with customer self-order kiosks, the operating world in my own space in McDonald's has changed. There are very successful restaurants that have no dining rooms. There are this concept called ghost kitchens. I mean, we are in a chapter in the restaurant space, not only in California, but around America, that it has started to, because of, well, it didn't have a choice during COVID, but now has a choice to present themselves, to offer what they offer, which is food, to a public that wants to order and enjoy what the restaurant has to deliver in a different way, in a non-traditional way.
yeah.
Um,
If I could just interject on that point for a minute, because I have firsthand experience with this. I'm a restaurant landlord in San Francisco. I have a Michi's Pizzeria as a tenant,
Peter
and
Wilkinson is
they've been
amazing
they've been
entrepreneur.
they've
Amazing.
been our tenant for 15 years. And before COVID, they were doing 60% of their business in house and 40% out. Now it's 10% in and 90% out, and so they don't need 4,700 square feet. And unfortunately, Peter Cooperstein and Amici's is leaving us at the end of this year. So it's very apropos to what you just stated there.
And if you think of, and I know Peter very well,
Yes.
and I love his brand. I have such
Yes.
tremendous respect for what he created with that Amici's brand in
He's
and
done a
around
great
San
job.
Francisco.
We've really
And
enjoyed having him and he's also a client. I put him into the San Rafael
really,
unit. I sold his unit in La Jolla, so I've had an ongoing
oh,
relationship with him, not only as a landlord but as a broker for him.
he even opened a damn restaurant in Shanghai, I think. I don't know if it's still there, but
Yeah, there were a few of them. Yeah, yeah. No, I don't think
uh,
so.
so, but that's, I'm glad you brought that example up because that's really a perfect example of, how the world has changed. So let's say someone like Peter with Amici's needed 10, 15 units to cover the geography of San Francisco because people were, yes, there was some delivery, but people were going into Amici's to eat. But as the world started moving towards the digital platforms, Uber Eats, DoorDash, Grubhub, and they realized for a premium, I can have the food delivered to my house. I don't have to deal with parking. I don't have to deal with my car being broken into. I don't have to put on a pair of pants. I can eat my pizza in sweatpants and watch, a football game in the comfort of my own living room. Peter and other brands like that realized, okay, well, instead of having 15 locations, I could probably do the same volume with 8 geographically located in a correct way because of the fact that I'm able to rely on third-party delivery. And if you take that one example that you gave as a landlord and as a friend and a peer of Peter's, Peter would tell you the same thing. He would tell you he doesn't need the same physical plant geographic coverage in a finite geography to drive the same revenue. And he's willing to give up margin in the form of not doing his own delivery, but paying the premium commission to DoorDash and Uber Eats and using their marketing vehicle, sometimes driven through a discount, sometimes just driven through pure convenience. He's willing to sacrifice margin to drive higher guest counts and not have the headache of additional staff and additional occupancy costs to landlords
Mhm.
in neighborhoods. And
Sure.
I think if you take that one example, that is probably playing itself out thousands of times across the country every single month.
Yes.
So the restaurant space is, I'm sure, I mean, I didn't go to the conference you went to in Las Vegas in November, although it's a fantastic,
No,
fantastic.
the one I went to was a few years ago, but it's the
Oh,
same
it's
basic
it's
conference.
really an impressive place where you see big operators and small operators get together and get on panels and talk about the state of the business. It's really an eye opener. Even if you're not on a panel, just sitting in the audience, what you can learn from your fellow restaurateurs is pretty extraordinary. And I think I have no doubt that one of the great themes that have occurred that occurs at that restaurant finance conference is exhorting franchisees, small business owners, even big brand owners to continue to change their model because, to keep your model, the geographic footprint the same, your operating model the same, your marketing output the same in this quickly changing world where everything now is being driven by digital. You've got to be nimble and you've got to be thoughtful, and otherwise, you will get eaten alive in the competitive gap game.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this question. You've obviously accomplished a lot of very successful things in your career. What single accomplishment has been most meaningful to you?
I well, the single most obvious, aside from the obvious, which is creating wealth and security for my family. That's what entrepreneurs aspire to do, to build something and be
Mhm.
rewarded for all the hard work, the 365-day work to build a business. The most obvious, greatest achievement that I've personally had has been building a team that has stuck with me for decades. I have probably one of the lowest industry turnover employee run rates of any franchisee that I've ever met, let alone restaurants in general. And that to me is my greatest achievement, is to have been able to build a team that has either achieved success working within my company or have gone on to be successful outside in their own companies, whether they have now become McDonald's franchisees on their own, or whether they've just decided to do something else and they're super successful doing it. I think about a friend of mine named Mike Bowers. Mike Bowers was my operations associate, who was essentially the franchisor representative of the brand, engaging with me on things like operations every day in my restaurants. A young man, I think probably in his early 40s, worked for McDonald's for 20 years and decided he had saved up enough money in over the years of working for McDonald's, where he bought a franchise and now is a franchisee up in Washington, in the northwest part of our country, and he's living his American dream. And so if I have that opportunity to accomplish not only allowing people to be successful within my organization, within my own organization that drives my own success, but also stumble on and watch people grow and prosper outside of what I've created under the arches. To me, that by far is the greatest achievement or accomplishment that I will have ever achieved in this hospitality business. The second piece for me is an accomplishment yet to have been achieved. Two of my three kids have just joined my McDonald's business, and so
Oh, congratulations.
they're third generation McDonald's franchisees. Hopefully, they're going to go through the process. In the world of McDonald's, just because your mom or dad owns a McDonald's doesn't automatically qualify you to be a franchisee. It's a pretty rigorous program. A lot of it, after my training, out of my control. It's up to the kids and it's up to the franchisor to determine whether the kids have enough background outside of McDonald's and have shown enough passion and fortitude working for McDonald's to become a franchisee. So for me, the next achievement, the next chapter in my life is to hopefully encourage them and watch them prosper so that they become a third generation of franchisees under the arches.
Oh, that's wonderful. That must give you a lot of nafas, happiness. That's wonderful. Yeah, that's really something. That's great. I'm sure your father is looking down and beaming, seeing that. That's terrific. So your personal history has shown you to be a strongly committed person to helping people in need and giving back to the community to make the world a better place. How did you obtain these values?
Well, I think as a franchisee, being involved in so many different diverse neighborhoods in a place like San Francisco, to be successful, you had to be engaged in community endeavors. You couldn't just open and close your business and serve hamburgers and French fries. McDonald's in general as a brand has had a very, very long history of being engaged with the community. For decades, the family business was super important to the McDonald's brand. And so back in 1972, when the first Ronald McDonald House was built and opened in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, essentially focused on being a home away from home for families who had critically ill children. And the idea was to make sure that the parents, even if they couldn't afford a hotel room, were able to stay with their child while the child was going through some awful, stressful things in their life. That that opportunity to engage in something as powerful and as meaningful and as important as the Ronald McDonald House got me more actively engaged in the community. Eventually, I came on the board of directors of the Ronald McDonald House in San Francisco and at Stanford. And when you're on a board like that and you volunteer time and you're raising money for a place like the Ronald McDonald House, it's not something like you're just sending a check in and you hope it's doing good. I mean, you literally can go into the house and see the families come together and feed on each other's need for support and energy and positivity. And to be engaged, well, personally as a father, as a parent, and to see other families who were my customers in need, going through such a stressful time, motivated me to want to do more. And then as the chairman of the Ronald McDonald House Charities of the Bay Area, we had the opportunity to expand our focus in the community. We built a couple of mobile dental mobiles for underserved communities that weren't getting the right dental care up and down the state, up and down the northern coast of California, and got involved in a lot of grant giving to organizations that were in need of support. And it made me realize that, again, as a McDonald's franchisee in so many diverse communities, I need to do what my customers need me to do. And at this stage, they expect a brand like McDonald's to deliver more than just hamburgers, french fries, and drinks. They expect us to create jobs, to create good training and a good positive impact to the communities that we do business in. And I think in part, it is what has made McDonald's such an important part of the fabric across America, this engagement between restaurant, the owners, the staff, and the communities that we serve.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. Now, I know your past history has shown you being a mentor as well as a co-founder of other food and beverage entrepreneurs with other food and beverage entrepreneurs. Could you elaborate a little bit on some of these other food and beverage projects you've been involved in?
Sure. Well, as you know, because I'm sure over the years, you get calls for, well, not only, hey, I'd like you to invest in this idea, but how about you invest your time and your experience into my idea? I've really gotten a kick out of engaging with younger, up and coming entrepreneurs in the restaurant space. Um, I think it's so important for our generation of restaurant entrepreneurs to try to encourage and develop the next generation of entrepreneurs. And so my phone literally rings once or twice a week by young people that I know or have been referred to me looking for advice, money, direction, feedback on them exploring their own hospitality dreams, whether that be, again, on the franchising platform or whether it be something like, creating something from scratch. So over the last 30 years, I've had the opportunity to meet lots and lots of unbelievable, super smart, driven, passionate people from all walks of life. And I've been fortunate enough to, be involved in some of those projects, sometimes as a mentor, sometimes as a board member, sometimes, helping to stroke a check. And, it's been one of the most enjoyable aspects of being a successful restaurateur, the ability to give advice, to give encouragement, to shine a little bit more of a light on someone's path that I might not have had in some of the decisions that I make. Now, of course, if you're a Burger King operator or a Taco Bell franchisee, I may not be so loving and
Right.
giving advice.
Yes. Right.
But um, but but you could be a coffee bar guy, you could run a sushi bar, you could be a, I'm just open to giving great advice and sometimes being engaged with, seeing someone develop into a business success because it's a great business, as you know.
Agreed. Great. Well, they couldn't have a better mentor than you, that's for sure. So what are your future growth plans, Scott?
Well,
With your kids coming into business, that adds a lot of excitement and future opportunities, I'm sure.
yeah, I think the next chapter of my life in this restaurant business is going to be focused on my kids. It's going to be focused on introducing them where I can to what it takes to be a successful restaurateur, let alone a franchisee on the McDonald's franchising platform, if they're so lucky. And I think that'll probably gobble up a good 4 or 5 year chunk of the next chapter of my life. I'll still continue running my restaurants. I still have passion for the business, as Ray Kroc used to say. When you're green, you're growing, and when you're ripe, you start rotting. So I try to keep a mindset, a growth mindset of being green and growing. And so I have a business to run, and I want to be as successful as I possibly can be. And I also want to introduce and encourage my kids to be good, responsible, successful restaurant entrepreneurs. And I think, between those two projects, that's going to occupy quite a bit of my business focus in terms of growth over the next
Yes,
5 years.
that sounds like an exciting opportunity to be involved with your family and further develop your great operation. So anyway, I want to acknowledge you, Scott, for being a mensch and making a real difference in the world. You have motivated thousands of employees to take pride in their work and strive for future advancement opportunities, and mentored many entrepreneurs in their business startups. Here are just a few of the worthwhile activities you and your team have supported over the years: being involved in numerous leadership roles in many McDonald houses and other McDonald groups, helping people improve their lives in so many ways; being a veteran SF Pride Parade and event supporter; and being a continual AIDS walk supporter. Scott, I want to thank you very much for your informative presentation today and making a difference in the world and helping so many people improve their lives through your support. And if someone wants to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that, Scott?
Well, they can send me an email at
Okay. What's your email address?
You can send it to me at scott@rodrickgroup.com, RODRICK group.com, or they can just hit me on LinkedIn and we'll connect.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much. Our upcoming Restaurant Dealmaker co-hosts will include in February Jim Mises. He's a consultant, strategic advisor, and retired CEO, and our president of such companies as Blaze Pizza, Freebird World Burrito, and Einstein's Noah's Bagels. In March, our co-host will be Bob House, who's the president of Biz Buy Sell, which is the world's largest internet listing service for Main Street businesses. And in April, Marian Costello, president of Skoma's Restaurant, and at one time one of the top 20 sales grossing restaurants in the United States. So again, Scott, thanks you for joining us today. And if you want to get in touch with me, the best way is to email me at steve@restaurantrealty.com. Take care of yourself, take care of others, and best wishes to you and your families for a healthy and happy new year. Again, thank you very much, Scott. Stay well. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.